All right, it's a very serious problem, and it's important to talk about it because it's not something that we're going to talk about, not something that we would assume, and that is loneliness in young men. Depression in younger people is being talked about more openly and regularly, but young men are not as likely to step up and go, yeah, I'm just sad. Dr. John Duffy's here. You ought to write a book about this.
Yeah, I really should think about that, Steve. That's a good point.
You didn't ask for a plug on this book, but I think the book's important, too. So will you please plug it and tell me what it's called and where it is?
Yeah, so when I ran across in the last few years loneliness and really like a lot of sadness, isolation, and hopelessness in young men, I wrote a book called Rescuing Our Sons that we published a month or two ago because it's more alarming and kind of there across the board, more so than we know, and it's kind of invisible. So there are kids, boys, languaging in basements and in their bedrooms, and we don't see them, so we don't really know this is happening to the degree that it's happening, that they are alone the vast majority of the time.
So is this a video game thing? Is this a
technology?
Is this
screen
a pandemic thing? Is this awkward social skills? I mean, what do we think?
So I think we're still trying to define for these guys what masculinity means. So they kind of tap out, right? Because they watch a lot of pornography. They're afraid of engaging with girls. You guys, 10 years ago, I was talking to every single teenage boy and young man, and we were talking about how to engage with girls. Now that hardly comes up because they're afraid of that. And so the video game thing, the pornography thing, smoking weed thing, the binge watching, all of this is kind of secondary to fear of like social engagement. And so there's a lot of anxiety socially. What are people going to think of me? I'm going to say something stupid. So you know what? I'm going to tap out of the whole thing altogether.
So are the boys taught to not emote because it shows who you are and shows your feelings, and you're taught as a young child not to show your feelings, which then makes them more vulnerable as either adolescents or adults? Or is it just simply because of the factors that you said, screen time, technology, just the pandemic, taking school from home?
Well, it's a great question, Jane. And oddly enough, it is that we still don't teach boys to emote. It's kind of surprising that we're still saying this like in 2024 because it seems like something we would have talked about 40 years ago, right? But when I watched what happened after the pandemic, after the bulk of it, right? Girls re-engaged right away with their friends, and they're hugging, they're touching each other, they're gossiping, they're flirting, they're doing all the things, and they're re-engaging in all the activities that they were involved in before. And boys did not bounce back after the pandemic in the same way. So, there's this disconnection, disengagement, hopelessness, and reluctance to talk about how they feel and what they're going through. And that isolates them all the time. And I thought that this was different 5 years ago, but I realize now, watching how the difference in the way the genders are bouncing back, that nope, this hasn't changed much in my lifetime.
So, aside from basic biological needs, what does this do for the future of relationships?
Right.
It's grim. Part of the reason that I wrote this book, Steve, is that I'm worried about the future of relationships because a lot of these guys not only don't picture being in relationships in their lives, they don't really picture like being successful, being really fully engaged in anything. They're like, if I get a job, if I get a studio apartment and I can be alone and I can be with my video games and I can have my THC in whatever form I decide to take it in, that'll be a good enough life for me. And they don't feel good about themselves. They don't think they're particularly relevant or important or necessary to the world. And so not seeing a place for themselves, they're just making it through life. They're not actively suicidal the way I think they were 5 years ago, but they're passively suicidal. A lot of guys have said, hey, if I walked out of your office right now and got hit by a bus, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I don't think I'd make much of a difference one way or another. And that's hard to hear, but that's the truth.
So can this isolation and loneliness, and I'm sure you're going to say yes, can follow someone into adulthood. And how important is it to perhaps get a child involved in something there where they can make friends, whether it's like a Boy Scout troop or lifting weights or being at the gym, playing sports, something like that. And if it does follow you into adulthood, what about a men's group? I didn't hear a lot about men's group, but I've been hearing a lot more about men's groups and how it's shaping and changing the lives of adult men.
100%. So yes, first of all, you're right, Jane, that this can absolutely follow and does follow boys into adulthood. When I talk to young men now and they look at their fathers, they're like, oh, adulting as a man does not seem that appealing. I don't know if my dad has friends. I don't know if he hangs out with anybody. He seems disconnected too, so I'll just play this video game here. But yes, even in manhood, like guys are joining men's groups that meet once a week or once a month. They're going on these men's weekends together and like playing games like tag and, like pickleball just to do something to find a way to connect with other men. And if you've got a teenage boy and a young man, we don't get many parent cards to play, but I always say play exactly the one you're talking about. Get your kid involved in something with a bunch of other people that meets every day. I love it if I'm working with a guy who's involved in sports or is in plays or in the band or something that meets regularly and they're with people on a very regular basis. They've got peers. They've got something in common. That feels like the antidote to all this stuff we're talking about.
Well, isn't it okay, too, to tell young men it's okay to be a man?
Yeah.
Go with me on this journey for just a second. Saturday morning, I was doing some stuff and working, and Barbie's on in the background. Okay, hold on. Bear with me. I didn't watch Barbie. I watched like 45 minutes of it, and it seemed that part of the message is that men in this manhood thing, inappropriately done, is a very bad thing. But it also was knocking down the masculinity question while doing the right thing and boosting femininity, but not just boosting femininity, that's not right, boosting empowerment in women. So can't we have both? Can't we have strong, powerful women with self-esteem and men, young men who believe it's okay to be a dude?
We have to. We have to have both. That's exactly right, and that's part of the conundrum I think that boys are trying to figure out, because I've heard from young guys more often than you'd think that, hey, when I think about masculinity, I think about one other word, and it's toxic. So am I toxic? Am I a problem just by virtue of the fact that I'm a guy? And is it okay to be interested in guy things? You know what I mean? And yeah, we need men to be men, and even like some of the stereotypic things that men are interested in. We need men to be, and boys to be, active and physical, and all the things that we try to kind of doctor out of them when they're young. They need all that stuff. They need that movement and activity, because I can tell you, when young men are inert, they're not moving, they do nothing at all. They are static in the world. When they're engaged, they are good, and they can make that distinction. They can decide, like, well, if I've got some stereotypically feminine qualities, I'm emotional, I like Taylor Swift, but I still like the Chiefs. I still like, I'm still a guy's guy. You can be all these things, and we need all these people in the world, and not mortified that they are who they are, or that they were born a guy. You know what I mean? Like,
no, you should be proud of it. You should be proud of being a man and being an appropriate man. I just think at some point we've lost our way a little bit with this, and and I think you hit on it. The word toxic in front of masculinity doesn't help. But if you're worried about it, I'm worried about it more. All right, what's the title of the book again? Because I think people ought to read this, especially if you have preteen boys.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, the book is called Rescuing Our Sons, and it's on Amazon and on my website and everywhere else.
All right,
I think it's important.
Appreciate your time. So do I.
Thanks, Dr. John.
It's Dr. John Duffy, 746. I'll tell you he's toxic. Is that Nick Gale? I'd like to see him in
He's a real bully.
Or see him in a skirt and lighten up a little bit. What?
No.
It's okay to be a man. It's all right.
Just be a good man, a gentleman.
Right. Here's Nick Gale.
Some manicures, yeah.
They're okay.
Yeah. Get one.
It's got the word man right in it.
Hey, it's true.
Manicure. Wow. Yeah, there you go. How do you think about that?
An accident on the drive southbound near Michigan Avenue. So stop-and-go traffic from about Belmont. That is causing some delays here this morning. 88 eastbound, the ramp to the Tri-State. Some delays there as well. Otherwise, traffic's moving along. Next update, 15 minutes.
Now, here's something else. Mike in Maryville, another good texter, says, my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday and how women talk about fixing a man. Therefore, putting the image out that the man is broken.
Yeah.
And they need to be fixed. That could be as dangerous as toxic when you're putting this stuff in people's heads. So,
yeah.
Ladies, just accept that men need to be physical and stupid.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And I also think, too, it goes back to parenting.
Yeah. Just don't assume self-esteem in any of your kids. Boost them as much as you can and kick their butts when you need to as well.
Right.